Hello and welcome to the GLP-1 Hub podcast. I'm your host, Anna Reisdorf, registered dietitian and GLP-1 user. It's always a lot of exciting stuff going on here at GLP-1 Hub. I have been pretty consistently posting videos over on the YouTube channel about various topics. So I posted one a couple weeks ago about how weight loss actually works, and one on Friday about the best foods to eat on GLP-1. And then I'm going to follow that up with the worst foods to eat on GLP-1. So you're going to want to check that out. I was also on the GLP-1 Collective podcast. And if you are not familiar with that, the GLP-1 Collective is hosted by Amanda Bonello. And she is a woman that just took it upon herself to decide that GLP-1 medications were too expensive, and she was going to start a nonprofit organization to advocate for more access to GLP-1. She will be on the podcast next week, so you are going to want to hear everything that she has to say. I mean, she literally has no experience doing this. She was just like, this is a problem. I'm going to do something about it. So I am so grateful that I got to meet her and have connected with her, and we are collaborating in a variety of ways. So, want to check that out as well. And then if you need a little bit of support on your GLP-1 journey, I do have on the website a GLP-1 store. So you're going to find on there the Beyond the Shot guide that tells you everything that you need to know to get started on GLP-1, including managing side effects, what to eat, how to plan meals, checklists, all sorts of weight trackers, all sorts of things. I also have some recipe collections and meal plans that could help you out as well. So you're going to want to visit over there, glp-1hub.com, and click the little store button. And finally, if you are loving this podcast, I would love a review. It helps us grow, get even better guests. They have some big ones coming up that I am very excited to share about. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. And today we are going to have another one of my Smarty Pants colleagues on, Kara Siedman, to talk about gut health and the microbiome. This is like such a big topic. I mean, I feel like we could do 4,000 podcast episodes about the microbiome, but we got to narrow it down to one. So hopefully she will at some point come back and talk about all the great work she is doing about supporting the microbiome on GLP-1 medications. So let's hear a quick word from our sponsor and get on to the show. Today's episode is brought to you by CaloCurb. CaloCurb is a 100% natural appetite management supplement featuring amorosate, a patented hops extract developed in New Zealand over 15 years and backed by $30 million in scientific research from Plant and Food Research, New Zealand's largest Crown Research Institute. It works by activating brain signals, including GLP-1, to help you feel full faster. It's clinically shown to reduce cravings by 40%, hunger by 30%, and calorie intake by 18% in just 1 hour. So whether you're working on general weight loss, trying to maintain your progress, transitioning off a GLP-1, CaloCurb is a natural and effective support tool to help you stay on track. Use the code ANNA, ANA10, to get 10% off your order at calocurb.com. That's CALOCURB.com. And let's get on to the episode. Welcome to the GLP-1 Hub podcast. I am so excited to have another one of my incredible colleagues, Kara Siedman, here today to talk all about gut health and the microbiome. So all of the little bugs that live inside of us and do so many amazing things for us. So Kara, why don't you introduce yourself, tell the people a little bit what you do, and let us know a little bit about how you got into this area of practice.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's like my most favorite thing to talk about. So like I said, I'm a dietitian. I've been working in the health space for now over 15 years and landed myself for bulk of my career, over 10 years working in gastroenterology practice, where I built, a thriving sort of integrative and functional medicine component to this very conventional GI group, which was a really beautiful relationship. People got scoped, people had big things ruled out, and then they'd come work with me, the dietitian, to basically work on the world within, which is the microbiome. And I think that's where it really just propelled my love of the microbiome and gut health. I mean, I think I was into it even before I even knew it. I was a food fermenter, loved fermenting food. I mean, it's always been a kind of an interest of mine. And so it's been really wonderful to turn it into a career. And I worked for various microbiome companies, and I work for currently a microbiome company where we're creating incredible precision products. We're really helping to provide more research. You know, we're a company that's focused on science. And so really adding to this now very large, robust area of research that's become very much the focus in the health world. And microbiome research has exploded over the last 20 years, now 15 years. And so it's exciting to be a part of a company that's not just working to develop products, but to actually expand the microbiome science and to add to this growing area of research.
Right. So let's start from the real basics. Okay. So what is the microbiome?
So we often will hear the terms microbiome or microbiota used interchangeably. But essentially, our microbiome is I like to think of it as the home for our community of various microbes or microorganisms that live within. So we can have different microbiomes. We have an oral microbiome, so the different microorganisms, which include bacteria that live and reside within the oral cavity. We even have an eye microbiome now. We have a brain microbiome that's being talked about. We have obviously the gut microbiome, which is the community of microorganisms that reside within the gut, which is our largest microbiome, our skin microbiome. And so that's what's exciting about this research is we're discovering unique microorganisms that maybe live within these specific niches or environments, but how interconnected they all to human health. And that's the biggest takeaway, is that all these bugs, this bustling world within, is a huge driver of chronic condition, but also a contributor and an impact of various conditions. And so we're just sort of uncovering this world of how these bugs are dictating so much of our health.
So I have heard that we have more bacterial cells in our bodies than human cells. Is that true?
We do. I mean, it's like very close. What's
Sure.
I think more fascinating is that we have 150 times more microbial DNA than we do human DNA. And so we truly are these sort of super organisms or holobionts that we are often hearing this term of. So we essentially are more microbial than we are human.
That's
Crazy.
When I think about that, I think about when you think about space, how space is vast, but inside it's like vast. Like that trips me out. Like my brain doesn't go that far.
I know. And it's fascinating because, you know, Hippocrates said it, right? Like all diseases begin in the gut. And we use that. We say that, you know, and it's very true that, you know, all these bugs and these microbiota and microorganisms are really having almost a more profound impact on our health. And that to me is really fascinating, that, you know, all these things that are so microscopic that we can't even see to the naked eye is determining our health.
Interesting. So our health, particularly in the United States, has significantly deteriorated over the last 10, 20 years, more, you know. How do you think the microbiome has played a role in that? Do you think it's like a cause and effect, or do you think that our food is just jacking up these little bugs? They can't do what they're supposed to do? Like, how? It's probably complicated.
It is. And it's a great question because obviously, you know, we evolve with industrialization. So there's a lot of different theories as to what's truly impacting human health and why, despite advancements in technology and medications, are we continuing to see a rise in chronic conditions like diabetes and obesity. And so it's beyond just what medicine has been able to do. And that's where the microbiome is such an important area of research and an important area that we're uncovering more understanding of. Through industrialization, we've lost microbes. We know there are certain microbes that are becoming extinct
Oh.
Industrialization from a change to obviously our living environments,
Hmm.
to the food that we're eating. I mean, so much of research and what we know impacts the microbiome. I think of these things as microbiome disruptors, dysbiosis risk factors. What are these external inputs? It's actually a term known as the exposome. What are all these things coming in from our environment that's actually shaking up and rocking these bugs within? And that is part of what's being studied as to why we're continuing to see chronic disease advancements and rise in certain chronic conditions that's unrelated to, say, just diet. And so that's where the
Right.
microbiome becomes not just an exciting area of research, but also an exciting area for intervention when it comes to working with practitioners or working with clients that are struggling with chronic conditions. It's almost that third leg of the stool. It's beyond genetics and environment only playing a role in our disease outcome.
Hmm. So if you're a person who, has a chronic disease, whether it be obesity or diabetes or anything, where would you start with seeing if it's being caused by a microbiome imbalance? Would you have like digestive issues or maybe not? I don't know.
And I think it's hard to say cause and effect. It's like what comes first, the chicken or
Sure.
the egg? And in fact, there have been some interesting studies done very early on, and something we can talk about, especially related to metabolic health, that shows microbial constituents or components from the microbiome that are ending up in our bloodstream that's sort of precipitating changes to, say, things like blood sugar or changes to weight. But truly, is it this cause or an effect, or what is that? And that's what we ultimately call this bidirectional relationship. Something we're
Mm.
really focused on is this, what we call the gut X axis, is this relationship that exists between the gut and other organ systems. So one of the areas of research that our company is focused on is the gut lung axis. We used to think the lungs were this sterile place. It's not. The lungs have their own microbiome. But if you struggle with, let's say, asthma, right, is your microbiome causing the asthma or vice versa? Obviously, we know there's a give and take sort of situation. But if you have asthma, that's impacting the microbiome. But if you have a poor microbiome, that could be exacerbating or contributing to conditions. So I never like to say your microbiome causes it, because we're just not that nuanced yet to know. But
Hmm.
we are learning more about unique microbial signatures, profiles, patterns that could potentially give insight into chronic disease development. So that's a very exciting area that's being studied now. Digestive issues, just to kind of bring it back to your question, what are
Yeah.
those first signs? We often think poor microbiome health looks like poor gut health. Like we just think of it as, oh, I should have bloating, or I should feel nausea, vomiting, or I should have abdominal pain. That's not always the case. That could be the first sign or clue that something's gone wrong, or that your gut, your microbiome's, disrupted. But for some people, it manifests as skin issues or anxiety or depression. Or think about that person who's really doing a lot of things right with their diet, but they're still gaining weight or they're experiencing cravings. That's where we start to look at the microbiome as a key player in ultimately our overall health and our health outcomes.
Right. So if you're a person that suspects that, say you just like, I don't know, suddenly put on 20 pounds,
Mhm.
where would you start with identifying or evaluating your microbiome?
Great question. And this is a evolving field now,
Sure.
but there are practitioners like myself, who specialize in gut health. And so we're using various questionnaires, looking at diet. There's stool testing now that's available to give yourself a glimpse as to what's happening with the world within. It's not always necessary. I think it's a piece of data like all other data we collect from
Hmm.
different lab tests. I think stool testing is a really valuable piece of data to start to explore, well, what could be happening, and then give clues and insights into how to direct your treatment plan or your intervention plan. So I love stool testing. I think it's for those of us nerds out there that, really want to start to dig into it. It's a very exciting area. There's different technologies, there's different types of stool tests, and I would find a practitioner, who's well versed in them, because I think it's a great area to jump into to say, okay, well, how might my microbiome be impacted, say, by this chronic condition that I already have and deal with? Or how could my microbiome, the health of my microbiome, potentially give me insight into something that could be developing that I don't necessarily experience symptoms or have any issues with at this time? And I
Right.
think it can go both ways.
I did one of those stool tests that they sent it to me to
Mm-hmm.
try as dietitian or whatever. And it came back, you have a microbiome that leans towards obesity. And I was like, well, yeah, I'm overweight. Like, but they didn't really provide a solution as to what I could do about it.
Yeah.
So I hesitate to recommend
Mm-hmm.
those types of tests for people because I'm like, well, okay, I'm overweight. I clearly have a microbiome that leans over. I mean, it's kind of like, thank
Yeah.
you for telling me.
Well,
You know?
first off, I will say it's good that the microbiome reflected that. Sometimes we see
Mhm.
things and we're like, oh, this person is showing signs of like these really inflammatory species, like go get checked for colon cancer kind of thing,
Oh
And
gosh, no.
I know. No, no, no. But I think that's why it's important to find practitioners and clinicians who have been trained and who actually truly do understand the microbiome, because it is a nuanced field. It is a newer science. There are things that we can look at on stool tests that could give insights into your body's not properly digesting, or there are some digestive insufficiencies happening that are, causing that downstream effect. And so I think I've worked in stool tests, I've done stool tests, and it's a lot of training. There's a lot of education behind it. So I don't ever recommend as a consumer ordering your own stool test and trying to interpret it or to draw conclusions from it, because truly stool testing is kind of its own science. And
Mhm.
how do you take that information and then pull it into clinical, actionable steps, I think takes a practitioner who understands the entire ecosystem and how that ecosystem is impacting your health, your diet, your other symptoms that you may be experiencing, like changes to your sleep or mood changes or hormonal changes that all could link back to disruptions or dysfunction in your microbiome.
Are you just talking about perimenopause?
Right. Unfortunately, your microbiome is very much disrupted by those
Girl, don't
hormonal
come on
shifts.
my podcast and say that to me.
Luck-
Anyway.
Luckily, there are things we can do. But hey, I hear you on that because I am entering that world myself.
All right. So if, let's say, you believe or you want to support your microbiome, so you don't necessarily have the funds to work with a practitioner, or
Mhm.
you want to do stool tests and have them tell you something that's worthless, how can you take some just like basic steps to have a better microbiome?
I love that because this is probably one of the most profound and most impactful things we can do, which is our diet. When in doubt, focus on the diet. And I'm not just saying that as a dietitian. It's one of those, we eat 3+ times a day, right? So it's something that even changing one meal a day or the snacks that you're choosing can have a lot of impact. Our microbiome is adaptable, it's malleable. So even with small dietary changes, we can actually see shifts in the microbiome in less than 24 hours. Now, more long-term changes takes consistency and takes time, but I think about those people who are like, I eat really amazing all week long and then on the weekend I just, go hog wild. Well, that Monday, you can have a completely different looking microbiome.
Oh,
But there's plasticity. Your microbiome kind of bounces back, and so to create new communities and true shifts takes consistency and time. But the diet is probably, in my opinion, the number one place we have to look at, not just from an area of causing problems in the microbiome, but also as what can we change to actually start to shift and make more positive changes. Our food system, unfortunately, lends itself to more processed foods. That's been probably one of the biggest things that's come out of microbiome research in the last year, is the impact that ultra processed foods. Now, ultra processed foods, most of our food is processed. I think I know you can probably agree with me that we, vilify like this term process, but most everything we eat is processed.
mhm.
Ultra processed foods are characterized as something different, right? These are foods that are voided, most of the nutritional qualities taken out, or they've had a lot of additives that have been added in to preserve, increase shelf stability. And there was a really interesting study that came out this year that looked at the combination of food additives, things like carrageenan, titanium dioxide, a lot of these emulsifiers and preservatives, that it's the combination of them that actually increased risks of type 2 diabetes. It was just a study that was released this year. I thought that was fascinating because we've often looked at these preservatives in isolation, but it's really showing this sort of consortium of additives and preservatives that are added that are actually impacting metabolic disease risk.
Yeah, I've always felt like it was probably a combination
Yes.
when they work together, not like
Yeah.
one thing. And now it's time for our Hero Bread tip of the week. I'm always struggling with trying to find something high protein to eat for breakfast. But if you're looking for a satisfying breakfast that will keep you full from till lunch and maybe even beyond, you can try this hack. Top a toasted hero bagel with some whipped cottage cheese, slice a hard-boiled egg on top, and put everything bagel seasoning on the top. This is an easy to assemble breakfast that has 32 grams of protein, more than I even recommend that you need. So you are well on your way to your daily goals. If you want to give the bagels a try or any of the amazing products that Hero has been launching lately, you can get 10% off your first order with the code GLP1HUB at hero.co. That's GLP, the number 1, hub at hero.co. On my GLP-1 journey, I've learned that I really need to maximize every calorie, and Gruns helps me do just that. Gruns are a convenient, comprehensive formula packed into 8 gummies a day. This isn't a multivitamin, a greens gummy, or a prebiotic. It's all of those things and then some at fraction of the price. Bonus, it tastes great. Their sugar-free option has just 1 gram of net carbs and 20 calories, but still delivers 6 grams of fiber and over 60 ingredients to nourish your body. And the best part, it's convenient. There's no shakes, mixing. Just grab a daily pouch and go. So whether you're running errands or need a sweet treat at night, Gruns fits right into your routine. And if you want to try them for yourself, visit the site gruns.co, that's GRUNS.co, and use the code GLP1HUB, that's GLP, the number 1, hub, and you can get up to 52% off your order with that code.
And it was, it's ultra processed foods, I think, have gotten a lot of buzz lately, but it's something that we do need to really start to pay attention to. And I think there's plenty of substitutions of small changes that we can make by eliminating some of these foods that actually has profound and long-term benefits. So I always say, if the microbiome space or the gut health space is intimidating, what we don't want to do is, and this is what I ran into, working in the GI space, is we become fearful of food. So we continually start to take food out of the diet, and our food diversity becomes much smaller. That has long-term negative impact on the microbiome. So I think in some areas, the easiest place to start is, where can we replace some of these ultra-processed foods or more packaged items with fresh fruits and vegetables, with some of those whole grains? Where can we add some beans to our salad? I think of, I'm really into, chia seeds or, basil seeds. My daughter calls them sprinkles. It's when she had real sprinkles, it was funny. She's like, these aren't sprinkles.
Only the child of a dietitian would say that.
Right? I know. And I'm like, she eats ice cream though, don't worry. But where can we add these things to amplify what we're already eating, to add in some of these more nutritious or, more of these, I don't like to think of I don't like to say food is medicine, because food is health. And when we're feeding the microbiome, we're actually feeding our whole body. Mm-hmm. But instead of thinking well, I can't enjoy any of my favorite foods, how can we amplify or increase the value of what we're eating? So I think of adding these things to salads. What kind of sides can we add to our plate that we're eating that increases the color, that increases the diversity of foods? So diet to me is always that first and most important area to focus on.
So your recommendation really is to get some of those high fiber fruits and vegetables,
whole grains,
nutrient dense, that kind of thing, to add more to the diet, and maybe
nuts and seeds.
Push out some of the refined processed things that a lot of us eat.
Simple shifts, can we move to, brown rice and quinoa than white rice? Or can we do a blend, right? I talk to my patients all the time, half and half, right? Better than nothing at all. But fiber is the key. And we've seen, as we've, industrialized, as we've continued to study the diet, that our fiber intake is continuing to go down. In fact, 7% of Americans actually eat the recommended fiber intake, only 7%, which is why when you hear stats like 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy, it makes sense, because our diet is not sufficient enough in these foods that are really providing not just essential nutrients to our body, but actually feeding the bugs to help them thrive, to help them perform all these very important functions that we know they're doing.
Right. So what about fermented foods? Where do those fit in?
love fermented foods. I mean, not everyone likes them. It definitely takes, I think a certain palate, right? They're often sour in taste. Fermented foods can contain live bacteria. A lot of the fermented foods that we buy, in the store, we always want to make sure they're refrigerated, that they contain live and active cultures. But interestingly enough, a lot of the fermented foods that we're eating, we're not necessarily getting the benefits from the live probiotics, because in fact, a lot of them are dead through pasteurization and killing them. And they're actually producing more of what's known as postbiotics, or these heat inactivated probiotics, what we call dead microbes that actually have beneficial function, or they're end products of fermentation. Many of us have heard the term butyrate, which is what our microbes produce when they consume these fibrous and these microbiota accessible carbohydrates, right? These prebiotic fibers. So a lot of the fermented foods benefits comes from the postbiotic action, but we want to make sure we're choosing them from the refrigerated section. We've seen studies done on certain fermentable types of foods that are added in, and we see changes in diversity. We see changes in the beneficial bacteria. So whether it's because you're getting live probiotics or you're getting the postbiotics, they're doing something to modulate or to modify and change the microbial environment that's benefiting our health. So we want to think of kefir. I love kefir. It's a drinkable yogurt. Definitely has a sour taste. But even if you add a little bit of honey or a little bit of maple syrup to make it more palatable, that is not outweighing any of the benefits that you're going to get from it. So obviously your yogurts, sauerkraut, kimchi. I think about adding these things. I love making, say, fried rice with cauliflower and brown rice and quinoa, and then adding kimchi into it. After it's done. These are all pickles. Real fermented pickles are really great options to add in. That can be very easy. You don't have to think about it. You can just eat it and get the benefits.
Yeah. We are fans of sauerkraut, my son and my husband is horrified, but we love it. I don't know.
I do
love
too.
it.
I save the juice. I save the
It's
juice,
so
and you
good.
can do. I mean, there's companies that just will sell you the juice of sauerkraut or the juice of and they charge so much for it, but it's because you're getting such a concentrated amount of these beneficial components.
So where do probiotics fit in, like oral supplements that one would take?
Yeah. And that's the thing, a lot of the sort of previous nutrition recommendations is consume a lot of fermented foods to get beneficial probiotics. In my honest opinion, we're never going to get sufficient amount of live microorganisms from the fermented foods we eat. And I think, in fact, the changes and the benefits we're seeing to the microbiome is more because of what these probiotics produce, and that's retained in it. So in my opinion, probiotics need to be supplemented to really get sufficient amounts that we know are creating, positive changes to the GI environment. And where the probiotic world is moving, not all probiotics are created equal. Strain matters. And most of us don't know what that means. So I think of us as humans. This is for all of us who had to take, biology class and going back to taxonomic hierarchy, which I'm sure a lot of us try to forget these things. But think about us, Anna. We're both Homo sapiens, right? We have that same classification, but you are very different than me. Or think about dogs, right? Each of those, I have a mutt, but a Yorkshire Terrier is genetically, and their DNA is a little different, or their genetic makeup, everything about them is different than, say, a West Highland Terrier, but they all stem from the same thing. So that's the same thing in the bacterial space, in the bacterial world. And when you get down to that strain, right, species is kind of a larger category. So if we think of let's say a Lactobacillus acidophilus, that's a species that's well known, right? When you get down to that strain, L. acidophilus, RSB 11, let's say, those little letters and numbers is identifying that it is a unique strain. It's like the Yorkshire Terrier. It's like the me, Kara Siedman, of the strain world. And what that really determines is the function of it. So when you get down to the strain, you're really determining different functions. So, a Bifidolongum 1714 is going to function differently than, say, a Bifidolongum 35624, even though they come from that same species. And so strain matters. And I think when we're looking to probiotics, we need to intimately understand those strains. And so I challenge companies, and I look to companies that are doing research on their specific strains, because you can't extrapolate one, L. acidophilus strain to another and say that they function completely the same way. You and I are very different. We have different personalities. We look different. We act different. Because if we think of us as strains, we are different, right? And so I think that's important in the probiotic space. And we have companies out there that are doing that, that are putting forth the research. And so I always say, don't just go into the store and grab the first probiotic you see. We want to look to probiotics that have, say, clinical meaningfulness. Are you looking for something that's improving your metabolic, your health? Or are you looking for something that's improving your lung health? We want to try to then match those very specific strains to the function that we're trying to improve.
So is there a cheat sheet somewhere? Because you go in the store and there's 40,000 million. I mean, I don't even want to walk into Whole Foods because it's just overwhelming. So how do you know?
So I think that's like the $1 million question is, as a consumer, how do I educate myself enough? And I think as consumers, I said this all the time about my patients, like I loved when they come in and they know enough to be dangerous because it challenges me to be able to educate appropriately. So as a consumer, the number one thing I would say is like, you look at a product and you're like, this sounds like something I may need. Go to the website, number one. Go to the company website. Look at what kind of research they're doing. If a company is doing research, it's going to be there. It's going to be showcased on that website. See what research they're doing. Look at the testimonials. Look at what kind of information they're providing to truly make sure that it matches what you're looking for improving, whether it's because you're dealing with gut issues or because you're dealing with sleep issues or you have lung conditions that you're wanting to see if you can improve upon. So that's kind of number one, is always go to the source.
Sure.
Because if you go onto the website and you're not finding any information, and then I would say, okay, that's probably not the best sign. Because a company, again, that's putting forth the research, something that's really fascinating about the probiotic space is there's been research done to show that when you put these beneficial microorganisms, these bacteria into your body, right? They're competing for nutrients because that's how they live and start to perform all these necessary functions that we know they're doing, from metabolic health to hormone health to gut health, right? They all have different functions. They're competing for space. And so sometimes when we throw a whole bunch of strains into a capsule because it sounds good, or each of these individual strains have specific functions or benefits, sometimes when you put them in a capsule, they sort of compete for that same space and they sort of outcompete each other, and you can start to negate any of the individual benefits that these individual strains have. Right. And so I am very cautious of this, kitchen sink type probiotic or this does everything, because what happens when you throw them all in is they might not even do anything. And so that's why I say, if the company is not doing finished product research, if they're not doing, preclinical studies, if they're not showing that the blends and the combinations are working to achieve the desired results, I think that eliminates a whole lot of competition out there. I think that eliminates a lot of potential options that we're wanting to choose from.
Right. That's really good advice. You can't just pick something up off the shelf and be like, oh, I like the package. It's blue. It's cute. Take this one.
That's good. Maybe that's the first thing that makes you want to look. But then while you're sitting there, listen, we all have smartphones. I mean, unless you're my parents who leave the house without a phone, but we all have smartphones. We can all get onto the internet and look while we're there. I think there's a lot of power in that. And I think most of us as consumer, I do the same thing. I go into a store and I'm like, wow, I like the look of this supplement. And what do? I look them up. I read the back. I go onto their website. I do the same thing when I'm looking at supplements.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about GLP-1s and the gut microbiome. This probably could take up a whole nother podcast, but how do the GLP-1 medications impact the gut microbiome? Do we even know yet? Or what are some things that we need to think about if we're taking a GLP?
I think this is such a big area of research now, and there are a lot of studies underway. Not just because of the, increased use of GLP-1, but really it goes back to this impact of what we understand the microbiome playing in overall metabolic health. And I think, obviously your listeners know, but GLP-1 is made by our body endogenously by our gut. And I think we don't realize that. So if we are not optimizing our gut health, we're not optimizing that GLP-1 production. And so I think there's a lot of options out there of natural GLP-1 support and all this. And there's truth behind that because our microbiome is a big player in this. In terms of the research right now, some of the preliminary research that's come out is showing a few things. Now, number one, there's research that's looking at GLP-1 responders, meaning, there are people who are not responding to GLP-1 therapy. And I think there was a study, if I remember correctly, in 2021, I'm like thinking back in my brain bank, that looked at GLP-1 responders. And basically what they found were those that didn't respond to GLP-1 therapy had a different microbiome, had a certain consortium of bacteria. Maybe this is a clue as to why they aren't responders. Now, more research is needed to really fully understand that. But that was very interesting to read because that could help us because we can modify and we can change the microbiome, right? It's adaptable, it's malleable. And so that offers an exciting area of potential intervention for those who aren't responding to GLP-1 therapy and really need to. The other thing we're seeing from research is that with GLP-1 therapy, so let me take a step back, that when we struggle with metabolic health, whether it's obesity, whether it's diabetes, whether it's metabolic syndrome and fatty liver, which we've now, renamed to metabolic, associated fatty liver disease. I didn't say it right, but
you got it.
MASLD now. That our microbiomes look very distinct. So we're seeing these very distinct signatures in, say, an obese microbiome. And we're actually seeing an obese microbiome really better. It's more thrifty. It can extract calories differently from food, which is why you can have one person eat the same thing as, say, someone else who's struggling with obesity eat the same thing. And that obese microbiome is actually going to extract more calories from that food. And it's because of this microbial makeup. So it's a thriftier microbiome. So we see these sort of distinct microbial signatures in diabetes and obesity. We see higher levels of bacteria that can produce or that can lead to more sort of endotoxin or what we call lipopolysaccharides in the gut. These are very inflammatory components that, again, in a healthy microbiome are there in balance, and there's a checks and balance system. But when we struggle with dysfunction or imbalances in the microbiome, then these sort of microbial constituents can start to drive changes to our blood sugar, can drive inflammation. And so we see sort of these distinct profiles. And so one thing we're seeing with the GLP-1 medications is that post-medication or while people on medication, again, there's been various studies that we're seeing more positive changes to the microbiome. Now, whether that's a result of the actual weight loss or we don't know, but we see the same thing in other weight loss interventions, gastric bypass and other diet and exercise, but weight loss. But so we're seeing really positive research come out of it, that the GLP-1s are having a very positive impact on the gut microbiome.
Interesting.
And again, is it because people are starting to eat healthier? And some studies have looked at, obviously controlling that. And so more studies are needed. The other interesting area of research that's being looked at is if you can support the microbiome and improve the health of the microbiome while initiating or being on these types of therapies, that we have more long-term sustained benefits. And I mean, I think it goes along with anything else, right? Behavior change. But I think when we start to think about the microbiome, it's got to be part of the intervention. It's not just diet. It's not just exercise. It's not just changing the behavior. It's not just being on a GLP-1 medication. We have to start to think about the microbiome. And if we can start to improve the health of it, start to shift these profiles, if we can start to improve the imbalance, and that's where a lot of these supplements can be very beneficial, then we can actually see better results.
Yeah, that's so interesting because there's a lot of questions about, can you get off the medication? And right now the research doesn't look that good, to be honest. But there are people doing studies about various protocols that have been working, at least in the short term, during the research term, that may be able to be turned into some kind of bigger plan.
Yeah, that would be a great study of initiating some sort of microbiome intervention. Not just from a diet standpoint. We know we need fiber. We know we need protein. We know we need these things that obviously help with satiety, but fiber also, in our prebiotic fibers in particular, that we know feed the beneficial bacteria. But if we are doing a controlled microbiome study alongside GLP-1, does that enable more long-term results? I think that would be very fascinating. They've done those types of studies in, say, gastric bypass, and it's been more positive. So
cool. Microbiome holds the secret to all the things.
I think of it as like the third part of the stool now, right? Like and even in not to go outside of this, but even in the world of, say, autism spectrum disorder, neurodivergence, it's not, we've uncovered a genetic link in science to that. We know the environment plays a role, the microbiome is now a really big area of research that's, really being looked at as part of that process. And it's the same thing when it comes to metabolic health. I'm sure we've all know people, we've had patients. I've had a lot of patients that I've worked with that are doing everything right, eating well, exercising, have had their hormones checked, have had other things ruled out and still not seeing the weight loss or the metabolic shifts that we would anticipate seeing. Why? What is that missing piece? That's where I say, as a practitioner, especially, we have to start to think about the microbiome.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think you gave us a lot to think about when it comes to it's like a whole world inside of us that's controlling all these things. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's
Oh, you're
incredible.
welcome. And I think what's exciting too is, especially when we start to break through the noise of sort of supplements out there, we talked a little bit about, how to find those companies, but this is where supplements can be really helpful in our regimen, right? You're doing the diet changes, you are adding exercise, we're trying to sleep more, but this is an area that, we have control over that we can absolutely do. One of the things I'm excited about my current company is, we created this GLP-1 postbiotic. So it's a heat inactivated probiotic, but we're seeing, not just in our preclinical studies, we have a clinical trial underway, but we're seeing that endogenous support, meaning we're increasing GLP-1, we're enhancing the ability of our cells to take up glucose effectively. These can just be really great supportive opportunities and options to just further advance our process, because it's not a question of GLP-1 medications being good or bad, or are we over? It doesn't matter. If they're working for you, great. But how can we optimize that? How can we support our own body's natural processes? And I think that's the same for, I worked in diabetes, for 5 years. I ran a diabetes program. It was the same thing. People were on medications and maybe not always seeing that exact change. You had to do diet, you had to do exercise, you had to do all the other things to optimize that. And I think we now have this new area of supplements that becomes an extra support system, a tool in the toolbox, as I like to say.
Definitely. That's awesome. So if people want to connect with you or learn more about your work with the company that you work for, where can they go?
So you can always find me on LinkedIn or social media, but our company is Reisbiotic. It's RESBIOTIC, and just go to reisbiotic.com. And we're constantly putting out, lots more research. And we have an exciting clinical trial underway currently looking at our GLP-1 postbiotic in metabolic health. It's a double-blind randomized placebo-controlled trial, which is exciting to do, especially, not just being in the supplement space, but again, in this sort of microbiome research space, the gold standard. So we'll be launching those results, in the next few months as they come through. So that's exciting as well. And I'm always available for questions too. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to
I'd
be a
love it if
source.
you would maybe consider coming back to share
I'd love.
Yes, the results. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Just so much knowledge for the audience. It's so great. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the GLP-1 Hub podcast today. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. The microbiome, like I said, is just so fascinating, and we are learning so much about it. Kara said so many things that I didn't even know because she's in the mix with all of that. So I'm so grateful she was willing to come on. I want to say thank you to our episode sponsor, CaloCurb. Don't forget that you can get 10% off your first order when you use the code ANA10, that's ANA 10 at calocurb.com. That's CALOCURB.com, and use the code ANA10 for 10% off if you need a little extra support with controlling your appetite or are looking for an alternative to get off GLP-1 medications. And finally, don't forget to leave a review. I know I say it every time, but it really, really does help the podcast continue to grow and for us to get even more incredible guests to come on and for people to find the show, because I think it's providing valuable information to everyone, or else I wouldn't be doing it every single day. So I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.